Everyone wants to be seen and everyone wants to be heard, wants to be validated, including yourself. Look for opportunities to do that with people.
Welcome to Behind Beliefs, Behaviors, and the Brain, your communication podcast, where we bring brain science and communication strategy together to transform how we lead, connect, and thrive. I am your host, Dr. Maisha Claiborne, mom, physician, coach, consultant, and lover of all things brain and behavior. I also happen to be a trained expert in cultivating trust and safety through trauma-informed communication. Now, you may be wondering, what the heck does that mean? No worries. On this podcast, you will come to understand it all. Together each Monday, we will explore and uncover what drives our beliefs, shapes our behaviors, and influences our communication, from individual relationships to organizational culture. Each week, we dive into the science behind trust and safety, relating, communicating, and breaking through limiting beliefs that hold us back. So listen up, because whether you're a leader, a parent, a spouse, or just some amazing individual trying to get the tips for operating in your highest self, on this podcast, you'll learn how to harness the power of the brain to create real change in your relationships, your leadership, and your life. Tune in every Monday morning, and remember to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now let's dive in and start reshaping communication from the inside out. It's time to transform one conversation at a time. Welcome back to another episode. I am always so grateful to be here with you because I know without my listeners, there is no podcast. Today, I am so excited to have this person on my podcast. I have to say, I always talk about how much I love podcasting because not only do I get to connect with people I've never would have even connected with, like from around the world, but I also get to reconnect with people that I haven't connected with in a really long time. So this person is not only a colleague, but he's a friend. And we've been friends for a long time, like college long time. So I am excited to welcome to the podcast, Wade Hinton. He is the owner of Hinton and Company. He's the CEO and founder, and his zone of genius is working genius and galvanizing and inventing. So he is just like an all-around amazing person. And we're talking about bridge building today. And so I'm looking forward to the conversation. Welcome to the show, Wade.
Thanks, Aisha. It's great to be with you. And yeah, you're right. This is a chance to reconnect with old friends. So all the way back to Emory. So yes. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Well, I appreciate you being here. And I like for the listeners to get to know my guests. So I would love for you to just kind of share a little bit about who you are, formal introduction, and then like how you came to be where you are.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep this brief. I'm a recovering lawyer, so I could talk all day, so I won't do that. But I will say that I'm a native of Chattanooga. Left here, went to school at Emory University and then on the law school in Memphis. Studied abroad in Hungary and decided to come back home. I practiced law most of my career, but have always sort of done a little bit of sort of the legal work, but also work around civil rights and diversity policy and things before it was DEI. So I go way back. And some of this work, but I've practiced all kinds of law. I mean, I've tried murder cases, but I've also done, major mergers. I was one of the first couple of hundred employees at Volkswagen here in Chattanooga, left there when it was around 2,500 to go become city attorney, and then went on to Unum in 2018 to become their first chief diversity officer and served in that role until I ran for office, and then started Hinton and Company. And so Hinton & Company has been around for about 4 years. What I like to say is, we work with leaders, supporting them to be folks that people want to work for and to work with organizations that people want to work at. And so that means, giving them those skills, those tools, those insights that make them better and make them more impactful. And you can really, help unlock the talent at your organizations and those on your team.
Very cool. So here's another thing I love about podcasting with people I know is I always learn stuff about them that I would have never known. So I did not know that you studied abroad in Hungary.
Yeah. So I studied in Budapest during law school, and it really opened me up to where I am today. I mean, I consider myself a global citizen. Mm-hmm. I better understand global policy. It played a role in me doing things like the German Marshall Fellowship, where I traveled to Europe with some Professionals from America and other networks as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just changed my worldview and perspective on just about everything. So I don't see everything just from a U.S. perspective, or, I try to see, well, how does this really impact things? And so when we talk about things like trade policy or tariffs, or we talk about, investing in, different organizations across the globe, that means something to me, because I'm like, these are folks who are, really trying to make things happen in their particular countries and nations. And we play a real essential role in that. So I try to pay attention.
Yeah, it's interesting, the value of really getting outside of your own land. I traveled and worked in New Zealand for 6 months, and
Wow.
it's very interesting to just see a whole nother point of view of how other nations practice medicine and how other patients interact with their doctors, And so that's and even like doing medical mission work I've done, in Ghana and in Dominican Republic back many years ago. When you travel outside of the US, you just get a whole other view, and you also start to see how other people view the US as well.
That's right. And so, there's a little bit more of critical thinking, right, when it comes to the different decisions we make as a country, and the role that we all can play in it, especially at that federal level, how things can impact our relationships abroad, right? But one question for you: while you were in New Zealand, did you eat something called Vegemite?
Yes, I did.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I was not a big fan, but
not a fan.
I was abroad, and I even from Australia, that they loved it. I was like, let me taste it, and it just was not
a fan. It's so funny, like you brought back memories, like what, Vegemite.
So I don't want to offend anyone out there. Everybody has their own. It's an acquired taste. I'll just
listen. I mean, I'm from the South, but I don't eat chitlins, so there it is.
Well, okay, that's fine.
See,
I ate them when I was a kid, so that's a confession here on your podcast. People know that I've added chitlins. So let's get back professionally and.
People gotta develop that rapport.
Hashtag I don't want that. So
yes. Well, I mean, building these bridges.
Well, listen, that's what you do.
That's what we do.
Well, I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, I remember traveling abroad and eating some things that I wouldn't have ordinarily have done. And so, but it is that exposure, right? That creates that moment of opportunity, of understanding and empathy. And in many ways, that's what bridge building is about, right? It's not about trying to come to agreements, right? It's not about trying to say we're aligned on everything, but it is trying to make sure you understand and can have empathy for folks. And I think that's really what we strive to do in some of our work with clients.
I think when we talk about, finding empathy and we talk about building bridges, one of the requisite things that has to be in place is transparency and open communication and really trust.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things that I'm finding as I'm, in these various spaces is that communities inside of organizations are really struggling with trusting their leaders. And the leaders of organizations, the CEOs and the COOs and the C-suite people, and I'm dealing a lot more with hospital organizations and healthcare systems. They have their concerns, they have their own things that they're dealing with, and there's a gap between what they're dealing with and what the people, the communities inside of the organizations think they're dealing with and are experiencing. And so, like, how do we start to reconcile that?
Well, I mean, it's really challenging, right? I mean, it's one of those things where, especially I would say in healthcare, for example, you have so many moving parts right now happening at the national, federal, and state level, that they are continuously trying to adjust to new regulations, requirements. And so getting just a good understanding of that, and then having to sort of make sure things are communicated throughout, it can be challenging. But I think that what you said earlier, which is transparency, it matters. Now, that doesn't mean you have to say everything, but I think it's important to say you don't know everything either, right? And there's that vulnerability can be helpful. I know that it may feel like, and I think we're wired to, really go after confident or follow confident leaders, and so you want them to know they have an answer for us. Yeah, that's true, but there's confidence also in saying, hey, we're going to do the best we can. Here's the information I have, and you move on, right? You still can have a short-term plan to address any adjustments, but also a long-term vision for where you want to go as an organization. And so, we encourage leaders to do that. It creates that psych safety. More importantly, though, I think is, not just to say I have an open door policy, but go outside of your office to create things like, maybe it's a town hall, maybe it's a intimate meeting with about 10 of your employees, so you can address, make sure those introverts feel confident in saying something in a smaller setting.
Yeah.
But doing those things that make sure that you're setting things up, that you have a real feedback loop, not waiting until something bubbles up, but you're doing it consistently. And I think that that goes a long way of creating that trust.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that when we talk about these levels of communication and these open door policies, like town halls versus office hours, it's so important to know your people. I think also we are, something you said earlier, we are very much socialized to not be vulnerable. There's a whole conversation about vulnerability and fallibility, and we are all dealing with unknowns. Like just, the whole country, save a few people, are dealing with unknowns. And so I think, as you talk about bridging with this transparency and this communication, to just acknowledge that, just to name that right out front, like, okay, listen, it may seem like we know everything, but the fact of the matter is we don't. And like you said, we're doing the best that we can. Here's the plan right now. The plan could change.
Yeah.
And it's really framing and prepping people that gives them that level of safety along the way. And the more that leaders can sort of model that vulnerability and that sort of, I don't know-ness, I don't know everything.
Yeah.
This is what I know, and this is what I can tell you about what I know.
And I'll say this, right? What I didn't say in the intro is that I'm also a father of a 9-year-old daughter, and my partner Iana, who is German. And so one of the things that I mentioned to her, and I know she gets tired of me talking at times, but I give her these lessons. And one of the lessons I said, I want to show you something, I want to teach you something, but if your glass is full, right, I can't add anything to it.
That's right.
And so for leaders, one of the things I would say is, if you come in with a certain level of, if you come in with a high degree of certainty with everything, right, and not having a little bit of that I don't know, a little bit of that curiosity, then that's where, the challenges I think really happen. And so when we talk about, again, going back to bridge building for a second, it's creating space for that curiosity. It's creating space for that, because it is not necessarily, part of it's a lack of curiosity, but it's also this having 100% certainty that people should really be afraid of, because it's certainty that will lead you into decisions that, didn't create space for other options or other perspectives or other views. And, we see what happens when you do that. And so we do that also in our own lives. I don't stand here as a perfect person, right, in terms of that. I know I've made things I've been really certain about emotionally, perhaps. But again, as a leader, though, we have to acknowledge that we don't have it all and create that space so you can have curiosity.
You brought something up that I have to underline, which is how you do anything. You didn't say it exactly like this, but I'm saying it. How you do anything is how you do everything, right? And so as we talk about this, we may be talking in the context of organizations, but, this can apply to your home life. Like when you approach parenthood, because those of you who listen to the podcast know I have a 10-year-old. And so they keep you on your toes, as you know. And so when my son used to
when I would tell him, I don't know, he would ask me questions and I'd be like, I don't really know. I'm not sure. Why don't we just look that up? He'd be like, but don't you know everything? I'd be like, no, far be it for me to know everything.
Yeah.
And so it's just like that gives rise for dialogue. That gives space for conversation and what you said, curiosity. And I think I love what you said about like when there's not a full cup of certainty, then it allows for the creativity to come in as well. It allows for the dialogue to come in as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think, who would we be if we didn't create that space? And we do it in certain degrees when we feel comfortable, right? A lot of times, right, when we have that degree of certainty, it can show up, especially when you think about things like inclusion, right, and equity. It can show up in terms of how we think about certain groups, right, and certain behaviors, right? And so that's the part where, if we really want to try to engage in a real way, you got to make that space. We've seen that a lot lately in some of the work, right? Whether it's people returning to office, where people feel like you've got to be in the office to be able to be productive, or we think that, working from home is the best way. And, to some degree, both may be right. And so you got to figure out for your organization what's right. But saying that I know it all, right, it can be a little challenging. You see that with even DEI, right? Of that, right? In some ways, we know the impact that DEI can make. We also know that in some organizations, the way it could roll out is that you don't create space for those who might not necessarily understand all of it, and then safe enough to say, hey, I don't necessarily agree with this because they might have been labeled a certain way, right? So I think we all have the work to do, and you can certainly move forward. And I think those that do, organizations and leaders alike, will benefit from that.
Yeah. Well, let's chunk it down a little bit because, we talk about like leaders to community, but what about within a community? Because, especially in larger organizations, you have such a diversity of thought and background and personality and in this environment that is so uncertain and so polarized, the interconnections and the bridges need to be built just as much inside of the community as they do from the top to the bottom.
That's right. So one of the things, though, we've got to really come to grips with this is sense of why we even have these divides in the first place, right? We heard terms like bias and everything else, right? But it is real that, like, whether it's your, the way you were raised, even where you were raised in terms of like geography, your family makeup, your friends, all of those things influence your core values. And then what's really interesting is when those core values, you're surrounded by people, or even you're a part of social media groups, whether it's on Facebook, TikTok, whatever, algorithms feeding you this, right? So it validates, this thinking that you have. That's and right. It could be that, I have a definition of this, that's my idea, what this definition of whatever term it is. And because I have the definition and everybody agrees with me, then that's what it is. And so my behavior as a result of that is based on those core values and beliefs, right? So I think we got to sort of understand that. So when people come into our four walls, they log in to our Zoom or team meetings, they're bringing all of that with them, right? And so it's challenging at times to try to, get people at least comfortable enough to unpack why they believe what they believe. And so what happens is we get in these conversations and it ends up being a sort of a shouting match, because if you say, well, how could you believe that? What's going to happen is they're going to defend their values. They're going to defend who they are because they shape their identity, their purpose, their belonging, everything else. And what we know is, and people have heard me say this, but when you try to extract someone, even if factually and the data proves that you could be right, and even if they said, hey, you know what, Maisha, I think that's a really good point. For them to go back to that community that's been validated to say, I talked to Maisha and this is really what happened with that word. Yeah. They risk being excluded, right? And so nobody wants that. And so I can't remember who said this first, but people would choose community over accuracy any day. So if they do that, then, it's like, hey, I'm going to belong to something, and because we know what exclusion feels like. And so, so if they want to remain a part of that in-group, they're going to even deny things that they know might not be factually right, or look for, again, confirmation from their particular groups. And so I think that's where we've got to start, right? And so really understanding that is important.
I also think that, as we understand these things, as we understand why others do the things that they do, we have to also understand why we do the things we do and our own internal responses and reactions. Because when we can moderate our own responses and reactions, we can begin to co-regulate with others.
Yeah.
And so if we are in a situation and someone says something that pokes an invisible, place of harm or an invisible wound, it's only natural for your body to react to that.
That's right.
And the question is, can you, number one, regulate it in the moment enough to see, to bring context to it, or to clarify, or to name what's happening?
Yeah.
And can you recognize that you have a set of filters and they have a set of filters? And so the filters may never match. Sometimes it's futile to try to bring someone over to your side. Just recognizing that it's two different filters, and that sometimes it's not personal. It's just what they believe, even though it feels very personal.
Yeah.
Allows you to interact with that person, especially if it's more of a transactional work relationship, in a way that is workable for the circumstance at that time. Yeah. Now, if there is a level of trust and safety, then you may be able to challenge that thought or idea. But it doesn't have to always be that way. Sometimes the best thing to do for one's self-care is to just recognize, this person has this thought, and the best thing I can do is to regulate myself and go on with my day. Or this person has this thought and I need to regulate myself right now. Maybe later I can go and be like, hey, say more about that, because I want to, that's not true for me.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so, part of it is like knowing yourself. And again, it starts with that sense of awareness that, we walk into these rooms and to these conversations with our own set of like experiences. So our own core values, what I just described, we have that too, and that shows up in our behaviors. But what I would say to folks though is like, one of the things you can do, we have a whole framework around called build, right? Part of it's, when you do have that conversation is to be curious, right? And so I hear you say that, right? And so I'd love to learn more about, what you're thinking about like this and how important that is to you, right? And so instead of it being about them having to defend their position, let them take a step back and think rationally about what's going on. And so because we don't really have conversations in nuance much anymore, that allows them to take a beat and really think, this is what it is, and this is why it's important to me. And then when you really do that, right, you get a sense to really understand what's, how is this showing up for them, right? And then you really try to almost lean in and to listen, like you understand to listen, but and that might require you looping, because it requires you to come back and say, well, what I heard you say is this.
That's right.
And doing that, that's a part of active listening. I know you know a lot about active listening, but it's a big thing, right? And so
it's huge.
Yeah. And so how it impacts them personally. And so, that's just a part of that process where if you don't really take a moment to understand personally how this is impacting them, because what we see on top, right, typically is like you think about an iceberg, it may show up in hostility or this whatever email.
That's
but
right.
beneath the iceberg, it could be fear or anxiety around getting this project done. It could be around all kinds of issues that it could have been a bad day that they're bringing in. So you don't know that until you're really taking a moment to dig in. And, and while it's great to have all of that trust, you don't have to necessarily have it all the way to ask these questions. And so that what I found is when I've paused to do that, now I got to say, listen, the reality is sometimes I don't have the energy to do it, and I'm going to be just transparent. But other times, like, I can really talk through it, understand their perspective. And at the end of it still, I had an incident last week where there was a little conflict, and, I spoke with a gentleman. He had his perspective. I said, I understand your perspective. Thank you very much. And that was it. I didn't agree.
Yeah.
And, we shook hands and that was it. But that's it. Conflict resolution at times is not even about coming to an agreement. It's about coming to an understanding.
That's right.
You can walk away. Yeah.
That's right. I love that. I love that. Sometimes when Brent mentioned listen to understand, and sometimes when we do that and we really are curious about one's values and what's important to them,
Yeah.
we find that at the core, we have similar values.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, at the core, a lot of times people have similar values, but how they get expressed and socialized and, the beliefs that come with that based on their upbringing and their, like we said, where the geography and the people around them, their education, not just from the system, but also from the community, the way those values get taught to be expressed is very different.
Yeah.
And so when we start to listen with that curiosity and dig deeper into it, we might find there's some common values, and we might find that there are some completely different values, right?
Yeah, you absolutely could. But you could have teed it up any better. So I said we have this build framework. So I said be curious, understand and listen, look at their impact, and then what you said is like lead with values and share values, and that's what we do in that, right? And if you're at an organization, it could be your company's core values. And so if it's, if you said, hey, we said that, hearing everyone's voice is important. Mm-hmm. So I understand that, let's just say someone doesn't support a particular investment or sponsorship because of religious purposes, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, listen, we're not trying to shift your religious beliefs, mm-hmm. But we want to make sure that everyone here, believes or adheres to these values, what we said, which is to be inclusive, right? And so, again, going back to those shared values, but it also could be that, to your point, we have personal shared values, right? Mm-hmm. We both are raised in a certain type of family. We both are raised, in public school, whatever that is. Mm-hmm. You can look for those things, and to your point, like you can really find connection when you do that.
Yeah. And I think that when you do, I love what you said. Like when you do find that the core values are completely dissenting, then you can say, okay, I see that's what's important to you, and thank you for your time.
No, I mean, unless they're at the company and they're like, we need you. I mean, these values are important. We need you to make sure you're showing up in this way, right? And so if you're, if you're a leader or, you're part of the team,
right?
And so if, you want everyone to be treated in a way that feels like they can be seen and connect and belonging, right? If they can't do that, then you got which gets to the D, which is like decide what's next, if anything. Sometimes no action needs to be taken, but sometimes there's a follow-up or check-in. But I think the most important thing is you're creating space and with the opportunity for connection.
Yeah. It's so funny when you say decide what's next, because that really is. It's like, well, there's a decision that has to be made if you're in an organization and you're a leader and you're unwilling to operate inside of the core values of the organization, then there's a decision that the person has to make, and or there's a decision that the organization has to make about that in order to keep the trust inside of alignment of values, the trust inside of the community with the alignment of values. I also think that when you're in an organization as a community, as an employee, sometimes an organization's values rub up against yours. And so I think that's also a place of reflection, understanding the core values of the company and recognizing where, if it fits or where it doesn't fit, and what do you need to, like, as you say in your framework, decide what needs to happen next. Do you need to, step away, or is there some support that the organization can give you to find that middle ground, to build that bridge?
Yeah. And the last thing I would say to that is, the other component, this is what with time to time when we do this, which is, I think an organization will, sort of say, hey, these are the values we have written, right? But what they practice is something different. Right. And so, and then what the leaders practice is something different. So I got my thumbs up here. Good idea, I guess. But it is one of those things where you try to get that in alignment so that people know, if we say trust is a big thing, are our leaders showing up in a way that does that? If we say that, simplicity or communication or any of those things, or collaboration is important, are we showing up in that way as a leaders, but also as an organization, creating an environment where that's celebrated? And so But so most of the times what we find is that values are great to have on your website, but if they're not in practice, then it can be a bit of a challenge. And so when you're attracting talent that thinks those are the values, but to your point, they bump up against it because they're not real, then that can be problematic for the organization. And long term, we'll want to make sure you're addressing that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think that, and this is just a like sidebar opinion, I feel like in an organization, if they're finding consistently that their actions are not consistent with their values, that may need to like the leaders may need to reassess what the values actually are so that they can put their true values out there and then allow for the people in the organization to decide.
Yeah, I think if you're listening to your organization, they're going to tell you, right? Also, but I think it's important to revisit your values, right?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
Things change, right? And so as you think about, you adopted values in the 50s and 60s, now like you have technology, you have culture that didn't matter back then. And so all of that stuff is different now.
Yeah.
So it's important to revisit. I mean, I'm a lawyer, and so corporate lawyer at that. And so we would, I did a lot of work with organizations in terms of entity formation, bylaws. I'll say, listen, it's always great to go back and look at your mission and vision and values every few years, just to make sure you're doing it right. Even your bylaws every 5 to 7 years, because things shift. And so you want to make sure you don't find yourself having to react to things after it's too late.
That's right.
So that's just a good practice.
Now, so I'm gonna do something I love to do. I'm gonna flip this to the personal.
Okay.
Because everything that we said applies in personal life and in family life.
Yeah.
From the finding common values I relate to this as a parent, right? Finding what our personal values, finding the common values in a family, leading with curiosity and listening to understand our kids, listening to understand our partners and our spouses, to finding the common values of the spouse, right? Revisiting those often for ourselves and for the family. And then like making decisions around what to do next.
Yeah.
And so I like to do that because whenever I do my talks inside of organizations, I always tell people, look, I'm telling you about what I'm telling you in leadership, and you're going to probably recognize the value of this in your home as well.
Yeah.
And it speaks to how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, I'll go pick up my daughter later today and I'll take her to ballet class. And one of the things that I am thoughtful of, and is I'm the first thing that she sees. I'm the first person she sees after school. And so I want her to know, one, I'm really happy to see her, right? I'm really happy to see her. And then I'm really interested in like what she did for the day. And I'm curious about, what happened with the friends. I start with the friends, and then I don't ask about I do ask about the lessons. Don't get me wrong. How many lessons did you do? This is the way they have at the school. Yeah. But I start with like, how was anything exciting happened today, right? I just want to be curious about that. And so sometimes I get some really good answers, but sometimes I'm like, nothing. Right? Nothing. I'm like, okay, all right. So I know something happened. I'll try to make up something like, no, your teacher called me. She told me something happened. It's like she also knows my personality, which she also is adopting, which I love. She will get me at times too. So but really try to do that in a way that and I don't pretend to know everything. I always tell her she's going to be smarter than me and all of those things. So I just try to make sure in the same way, I try to show that appreciation. I tell, employers and leaders especially, people want to be respected, but they really want to be appreciated. And so that's a different feeling.
It is.
Not only for you, like in a sense of gratitude, but how they receive that. And if they receive that as appreciation, that they really appreciate it for the things that you show up differently. I mean, that's when you get that's more engagement. It's more curiosity. They feel that trust. It's a lot that comes with that. So if you can just, for a moment, think about how you can appreciate your employee in a way that they want to be appreciated. Not everybody wants to be called up the stage and all of those things, but in a way that is there's a book on love languages for the workplace. So in a way that speaks to them, then I think you can get there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that it's useful to be said, appreciate often, acknowledge often, and acknowledge the little things, right? Feedback doesn't always have to be when things go wrong. Feedback can be just because, that positive feedback can be just because.
Yeah.
So, totally agree with that. Well, I love this conversation. I mean, this building bridge conversation. I told you before, like, I don't know where the conversation is going to go. It's going to go where it's going to go. And I've loved where it's gone, finding this middle ground, finding this common values, and these multiple ways that we've talked about building bridges. So I would love for you to share if there is a takeaway. What would you like for the people listening to take away from all the things that we've talked about today?
Yeah. So I would say, it will be as frustrating as it might be at times, as challenging as it might be at times. Everyone wants to be seen, and everyone wants to be heard, wants to be validated, including yourself. Look for opportunities to do that with people. Be curious about their belief system and how it was formed. Ask them, you can ask them questions like, where are you from and how did that shape who you are? All kinds of ways to get to that sense of connection. I think along the way, you'll find that, again, there is a great opportunity for you to learn, but also for them to learn about you. And you might find that maybe you're not so different after all. And so that's what I would encourage folks to do, and, practice it at home, but also certainly at work. But at home, what that means is maybe you go into an event where you may be the only person that looks like you, or even has your perspective, but but it again allows you that exposure that continues to allow all of us to grow. So that's it.
I love that. So you help organizations and you help leaders to be their best, to be their best selves. You that's what you do. If there's anyone in the audience that's listening that is in an organization and they want to have you come speak, have you come train, have you consult, how do they reach you? How do they follow you?
Sure. Well, we're on LinkedIn at Hinton and Company, HINTON and Company. Or on the website is hintonandco.com, HINTONANDCO.com. And there you can just contact us. You can see the services we provide. But, especially that organizations that right now they're committed to a culture of inclusion. They're committed to creating spaces of safety, but may feel stuck because of all the noise, right? So we help provide, I think, some pragmatic steps and approaches to getting through that. As you said, interesting time. So that's it. I'll leave it at that. Yes.
Interesting. The word we use when we don't really have any other words to say.
Well, it's a time of change, and I think we've got to be real about it. Those are the principles of VUCA that people, it's an older term, but there's, which stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And so we've got to really sort of be really firmly rooted in our values to get through that. And language may shift along the way. That doesn't mean that you're less committed. It just means that you're thinking about that long-term vision and how you get the work done.
Say that again, because I think it needs to be said again. Language may shift along the way,
but stay committed to those long-term values because, as I mentioned, I've been doing this work. It was not DEI when I started. I don't think it'll be DEI when I finish.
That's right.
Hopefully it's not tomorrow, but DEI, but it'll be something different. And I think that's okay. The world evolves, we evolve along with it.
That's right.
And I think we'll be stronger and better for it because, we then began to emphasize on more things, right? I think there was a lot of emphasis on diversity alone, not enough on inclusion and equity.
That's right.
It now allows us to think differently about how we show up in the ways to support our employees, our customers, and those that we serve. So,
yeah. Thank you so much for the conversation. It was a rich conversation. I feel like there are things that we could have touched on that maybe we could touch on in a future episode.
Yeah, happy to come back.
We'll work that out. We'll work that out in the green room later. But thank you so much for being with me today. And y'all, we will have all of Wade's information in our show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, it will be in the description. But if you're listening on a listening platform, you just check the show notes and you can reach out to him through any of the description or show notes. I implore you to share this, if you're in an organization, with your leadership, with your colleagues. Share it with a family member or a friend. We want people to really have this information be out there, because you never know who this can help. And leave a review. Leave a comment and let us know, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you're listening to, even YouTube podcasts. Yes, YouTube has podcasts now. Leave a comment and leave a review to let the people coming behind you know that the information that we're giving is valuable information. So with that, once again, I always like to thank my audience. Keep listening. And until the next time we see each other, stay empowered.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. We truly appreciate our listeners, because without you, there is no podcast. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it gave you fresh insights and practical tools to elevate your communication and build trust and safety in all areas of your life, from leading your teams to strengthening your relationships at home. If today's conversation resonated with you, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, share this episode, and leave us a 5-star review. Your support helps us reach more people looking to enhance their relationships, their leadership, and the communication in every area of their life. If you are ready to take your communication to the next level, I encourage you to check out our Communication That Transforms online course. This course dives deep into creating psychological safety, mastering trauma-informed communication that allows you to build behavioral flexibility and tackle any circumstance in your life. You'll learn practical strategies for handling difficult conversations, navigating conflict, and cultivating trust in a way that truly resonates with the people around you and leaves them feeling seen, heard, respected, valued, and welcome. This course is designed to help you transform not only how you lead, but how you show up in all your relationships, whether in the boardroom with your teams or at home with your family. Check out the course at mindremappingacademy.com/TICC to learn more, see the full course catalog, and register. This link will also be in the show notes. That's www.mindremappingacademy.com/TICC. Finally, if these topics resonate with you and you want to bring them to your department, your team, or your organization, I'd love to speak with you. Reach out to me and invite me in for a workshop or a conference tailored to elevate your organization's trust, collaboration, communication, safety, and belonging. You can learn more and reach out to me by visiting mindremappingacademy.com/corporate-programs. Remember, change happens one intentional conversation at a time. With one small shift in how we connect, listen, and lead. Keep listening with intention and communicating with clarity. And until the next episode, stay empowered.